Things that I really like about us as a group and as a church is that we tend to, and I think one of the things we do really well, is we help those who are in recovery from various types of addiction. And this has long been the ethos of Communitas Church, part of this building. What used to happen in here while Communitas and other groups were hanging out was there were recovery ministries. And so many of you participate in and help out in what we see, and it was reflected in what Georgie read about taking people from bondage, helping them move into a position of healing. And now the number of you who have said, yeah, I recognize that I was taken from bondage. I've been healed of my affliction, and now I'm actually going to go back out and help others experience this same type of liberation and freedom. And so, thank you. Thank you for doing that. That's part of what we do as believers, and this is even what we see in the discipleship process, that in order to be a disciple of Jesus, it isn't just learning from Jesus, but it's actually becoming like Jesus, doing the things that he does, and which entails going out and finding others who need to know this and are discipled as well. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. So notice throughout this passage this idea of taking, healing, and sending. And so this week we're just going to focus on that, and then next week we'll focus on the latter part of 14 and the various responses that Jesus invites us. But what I want you to understand, I want you to take away from today is that Jesus takes, he heals, and he sends. He takes, he heals, and he sends. So let's look at Luke 14, starting in verse 1. So one Sabbath, when he went to dine in the house of the ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. That word watch brings about, it's kind of like an espionage type watch. It's not just like, oh, they're like seeing people come in the door on Sunday, and we're like, oh, that was a smart choice to wear the shorts today. Good job, or whatever. But they're looking on him with suspicion. They're watching him as though a spy would watch out for somebody from the other side of the camp, right? So this isn't a kind type of watching, which I find ironic, because what should they be doing on the Sabbath? Should they be spying on Jesus, or should they have eyes on the Father, right? The whole idea of the Sabbath was to take a break so that you could focus on and receive and know and better understand the love of God. And these people, twisted as their hearts are so intent on finding the way that Jesus is acting inappropriately. Instead of watching the Father, they're spying on Jesus. Let's notice those differences. And behold, so Luke's saying, hey, check this out. There was a man before them that had dropsy. Anybody ever been diagnosed with dropsy? Anybody know what dropsy is? Dropsy is another term for edema, so it's swelling, it's fluid is taking place in the body. Sometimes if you like women when they're pregnant, they'll get this in their feet. Other people, due to various types of infections in the body, you'll have swelling and things just get puffy and it gets really uncomfortable. And in that time, they often thought it was, some people thought it was related to sexual sin. And so they have this person who's there, and now we don't know whether or not the Pharisees brought this person in as kind of a plant to trap Jesus, or if he just happens to be there, because it was fairly common that you would set extra tables on the Sabbath meal for people to show up and to be together and to be with one another. Because remember, this is something that we would do communally. And so Jesus, and I love this, and Jesus responds to the lawyers and Pharisees saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? I just so appreciate that, especially in these chapters that we're seeing moving forward, just the resolute serenity of Jesus, where he's just like, I'm not really interested in trying to adhere to your societal norms that you have placed on yourselves and on others that don't line up with the kingdom. I'm just not interested in perpetuating these rules that you've put on that end up being this burdening yoke to folks. I'm just not going to do it. And then beyond that, then he pushes back against the rules to try to help them to see. I mean, let's just, like these guys, we've read this, the Pharisees and the lawyers, they're not very pro-Jesus. And yet, they invite him and he shows up. How many of us, if we're in some argument with somebody and we're having some tension in the relationship and they're actually trying to kill us, On a day of rest, when you're supposed to just be, very non-adrenal and just kind of setting up the day to just know and experience the Lord and move from anxiety to secure attachment in Him, how many of us would choose, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to accept that lunch invitation from that person that would really rather just stab me in the back. And yet that's what we see Jesus doing. How secure in the Father's love is He that He's just like, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do. He's so mission focused, He's so intent that He says, yeah, we'll do this. And He responds to them saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? Is it lawful? Their law said no. Because healing is work, which kind of shows the brokenness of their thinking. They're thinking, oh, it's up to me to be able to heal. It's my power. It's my ability. It's me. This is a burden that I carry. Not understanding that the healing power comes from God. And so it's not a lift at all. It's merely acknowledging His reality, and the byproduct then is healing. Okay? And I dig this. And they remain silent. Does that stick out to anybody else? Jesus poses a question to these folks, and they just remain silent. They don't speak. Not because they're wowed, I don't think, but they're just sitting there. They're waiting. Now, Jesus could sit and continue, but I just appreciate it. He's like, I have no interest in playing your games. Then He took the man with dropsy. He heals him, and He sends him away. So there's this person, just swollen. And it's not like this guy's probably getting carted around. He's got to walk places, he's got to do stuff. It was a laborious society. And he's just walking around bruised and swollen all the time. And here's this day of rest. And the Pharisees are like, well, we don't want to heal him today. There's 6 other days. And Jesus is like, seriously? And then He shows them the error in their thinking. He says to them, which of you having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on a Sabbath day will not immediately pull him out? Okay, so anybody have a well? Okay, you got a well? And who all has wells? Okay. How many of you, is your well something that you could fall into easily? Okay, yeah, 2,000 years removed, what we've done is we've gone, you know what? It would be really smart if we capped these things. And it would be good if we, kind of set some things up so that we're drawing water from deep down in, and we pump it up, and our ox doesn't fall in anymore. And also our kids, because, it's just really inconvenient. Like, I don't know if you've ever met my son. He loves to run. We live kind of close to the street. And there's just this low-level sense of fear that I think Megan and I just kind of walk when we're like, that kid does not know how to look left or right. Just not a skill that he has yet. And if we lived in ancient Near Eastern Palestine, where you have open wells that they didn't cap and they're just holes in the ground, like that kid probably needs to wear a life jacket everywhere he goes because he's going to fall in a hole. And now, if he were to fall in a hole on a Sabbath day, nobody would think it odd of me that I'd be like, I'm going to go get him out of that. It would be you'd think it would be pretty weird if he falls in the hole and I went over and was like, hey, buddy, good thing we put your life jacket on. I'll send you a snack, but it's day of rest. I know you're not resting. You're panicking. I know that your body is filling itself with cortisol right now, and it's going to be kind of hard for you to think clearly as you grow up. But tomorrow. Good? I'll drop you some snack sticks. They're plastic wrap. They won't get wet. It'll be okay. It seems ridiculous, but that's what's going on within them. And then Jesus says, no, let's be done with this. Let's be done with this sort of, No. Let's bring life. Let's bring fullness to fruition. Let's bring the kingdom of God. Let's manifest this healing. Let's let this Son of God live life to the full. Takes him, heals him, and then says, see you later, go on your way. Now, you would think, so today, I mean, the application, kind of what we see from this, we're gonna look at what the Pharisees don't do, and that's going to inform what we ought to do. Now, the Pharisees here, notice the response. Verse 6. And they could not reply to those things. If you saw somebody who's swollen, and they've got edema, they've got fluid throughout their body that their body cannot dispel, and you see somebody walk up to that person and say, you're healed. Put hands on them, heal them, swelling goes away, and then they take off. What's your reply? Right? Yeah. Anybody else have a reply? High fives all around? Yes? Well, other replies. Not rhetorical. This is, wow. Yeah. What else? Jumping for joy, right? Yeah. Imagine being that person. You've had like swollen feet and you're walking around ancient Near Eastern Palestine. Or maybe I don't know what, it doesn't say what part of him is swollen, but like, could you imagine? Like, it's hot out right now. Like, last 2 days, like, I've had to be very careful because I don't do well when it's hot. I could not imagine if I was walking around retaining water and it was this hot all the time. Ugh. Okay? Imagine now that you're healed. What's your response? Thank you? Yeah. Okay? How do these Pharisees respond? They don't. They should be jumping for joy that the Messiah has come, that their long-awaited hope, this thing they've been waiting 400 years to happen, is right there. But they're so tied up with self-protection and self-promotion, as we talked about last week, that they can't see it. They're like, oh, this is going to upset the apple cart. My religious system that I've been really secure in, and that's kind of brought me some hope. Oh, man, this is like really rearranging my theological categories. And we can laugh at that, but then we also need to allow it to permeate our hearts and go, yeah, where am I, the chuckle-headed Pharisee, looking down a hole going, I don't really know. Where am I the one who doesn't expect that sort of healing can happen? And when and if it does, we just take all of our post-enlightenment logic and go, I'm going to reason that one away. Instead of taking the opportunity to praise God that somebody who has been physically limited in their life is now experiencing life to the full in the totality of what wholeness can and will mean. Continuing on. So he challenges them, and then he gives us this example of what we can do. There's two things that Jesus is inviting us to do that the Pharisees aren't doing, and it's humility, walking with humility, and generosity. So verse 7, he tells this parable, and he says, hey, I'm having this party. So how many of y'all have ever thrown a real big party where you throw out a save the date beforehand? This is common among, in kind of ancient Near Eastern culture. They'd send out an invitation like, hey, this day, there's going to be a party, so just kind of block it off. Just be aware that we're going to have a big feast. Don't make other dinner plans. We're going to be hanging out. Now, in our Western society where we're like real keen on time and watches and whatever, what do we want to know? We want to know where it is. We want to know what time the dinner is going to be ready. Okay? And they're like, hey, it'll be done when it's done. Because when you're cooking whole big animals, like if you give me a steak, I can tell you within a couple minutes when that's going to be ready. If you're cooking a whole animal, you're like, when it's done, it's ready. We'll call you. And so you just kind of sit with this expectation that day. So it's save the date, and then at the time, people will go out and they'd say, hey, come on, let's go do this dance. It's time. And so you'd come in and you start to sit down. And so there might be people who are there and they're lingering around and they're hanging out. And often the honored guests would be the ones who would show up last. And so Jesus is going, look, you're so concerned about your position that you're showing up and you're taking this responsibility. You know, as human beings, we don't take. Okay, we receive. We don't take, we receive. This is what we see in Genesis 3. We're to receive, and we're to be invited, and we're to remain humble. And Jesus says, don't don't be so concerned about what other people think. Don't be so concerned about this self-promotion as though you need to be the one that secures this position before the Lord. It's been secured by the Lord already. And then we flip over to verse 12, and he says, to the one who invites him. He says, when you're giving a banquet, don't be thinking about inviting other people just that they would invite you back, right? He's saying, hey, don't look above and go, hey, I want what they have, and so I'm going to try to run in that circle. Instead, go, this is what I've been given, and how do I help those that are less fortunate than me experience what I am experiencing? How can I bless others as opposed to looking for the ways that I can be blessed? He's saying, look, the response here that when Jesus takes us and he heals us and he sends us isn't one of pride or accomplishment, but rather one of humility and generosity. We reflect on Romans 12, right? Don't outdo one another in showing love. Don't think of yourself higher than you ought to. Recognize that you have been given by the Father, that the Father is generous, and that your ability to relate to him is secured by the Son. So again, our takeaway for today, Jesus takes, Jesus heals, and Jesus sends each one of us every time, all the time. And this helps us to understand and address the totality of our needs in 4 different ways. One, physical healing. I know this is an ongoing conversation, and I was reading one of the commentaries that I was reading just completely skipped 1 through 6. They talked about 13 and then just picked it right up in 14:7. We're not really sure what to do about this. It's just kind of odd. And so I want to pause and I want us to just acknowledge that and be willing to wrestle with, what do we do with this passage where Jesus is just like, hey, you've got a physical condition, and I'm going to place my hands on you and I'm going to heal you. And it's easy for us to go, yeah, that's the thing that Jesus does. But then we flip over to Acts and we see the disciples doing the same things. And so what does that do to our theological career? How do we start to think about that? How do we process that? As we've talked about before, often there are camps theologically that will place a lot of emphasis on physical healing and not so much on becoming like Jesus in the rest of our lives. In some places we'll talk just about how we become like Jesus, but we don't really think that much about physical healing. And I would say that we need to wrestle with the tension and uphold both of those as we become and look more and more like Jesus. Secondly, it addresses our need to be taken from our sin. As Brian talked about us a few weeks back, and we'll continue to come back to this over the next few weeks as we look at these coming chapters in Luke, Jesus is on an Exodus mission. This is hearkening back, if you spent any time reading the Old Testament scriptures, and we see that this pattern of Yahweh with his mighty outstretched arm taking the people from captivity and bringing them out to a place where they can experience healing, as the phrase goes. It took just a matter of days to get the Israelites out of Egypt. It took 40 years to get Egypt out of the Israelites. And so there is this process where the Lord is going to take us from our sin and he's going to provide healing for us so that, not just so that we can go, oh, look, I'm whole. Hashtag healed. Great. It's not for your promotion. And it's not so that you can just merely to put aside our protection, but rather that we would go out and we'd send to proclaim the goodness and the glory of God, out of a deep-seated understanding of who we are and what he has done for us. And so this is the good news of the gospel. Ben alludes to it almost every time he talks about communion. Right? That you've been taken from your sin. One of the things I appreciate about those in recovery and that we've talked about, like coming out of addiction, is this: you have to come to this point where you just go, yeah, I'm no good on my own. I can't heal myself. And the good news of the gospel is that Jesus can, does, has, will, and will continue to do so forever. And so he has taken us from our sin. And this is the good news, that it is not something that we overcome on our own, but it's something that he does and has done on the cross and continues to do by the power of the Holy Spirit into and through us each and every day of our lives if we're willing. Secondly, we need to be healed from thirdly, we need to be healed from our wounds. We need to be healed. This can be physical, this can be spiritual, this can be just the totality. Like, I don't know that we need to bifurcate and like separate all the like, oh, what part of this is the healing? No, you need to be healed, period, and Jesus can do it. And when it comes to the recovery from the more deep-seated wounds that come from the result of our sin, it's only Jesus who does this, and we see that he does this in relationship. So often the very ways in which we are wounded are the very ways in which he heals us, right? We say, oh, I've been wounded by people. He's going to use people to heal you. Okay, we need to be healed from our wounds. The fancy word for this is sanctification, but it's this ongoing process of becoming more and more like Jesus. And I think that in our kind of Western evangelical Protestant Christianity does really good at the take, and like we do okay at the heal. We're not really sure how to categorize sending outside of this sort of guilty, like, well, you should tell your non-believing neighbor about Jesus so they don't go to hell and you feel better about yourself. I mean, cool, but not good news, right? Like, hey, I want you to do this thing so I feel better about me. Pardon me if I don't show up to that party, right? But when we come from, hey man, I was taken from my sin. This is where I was. And if you've been through any of our 9-word testimonies, or you've heard folks give their story, we often talk about like, here's where I was. Here's the good news of Jesus that met me in that spot. And here's where Jesus is taking me. I was taken from my sin. I was transformed and healed by the love of Jesus, and this is the direction that I'm going, and man, it is awesome, and I would love for you to be along with me. Will you join me? Will you come and see? Will you give Jesus a chance? The great preacher Charles Spurgeon would often say, people say, you don't need to, defending God is like defending a lion. You don't need to defend the lion, you merely need to open the cage. So we spend all this time kind of thinking about how do we construct this? Just invite people into your life. Invite people along and show and tell them about what God has done into and through you, and invite them to experience the same thing. And so we see that the fourth thing, we need to be sent out. Part of our pre-fall existence, we see, is not just to stay within the garden. It was always to go out into the chaos, into the fray, and make that look like the garden. Move out into chaos and bring order to it. Our existence, the very core of our identity, was not just to sit back on our laurels, but to participate in what God is doing and helping to make all the world exist the way that he has created it to be. When we think about discipleship, one of the kind of the last stage, and if you're following Jesus and you're familiar with kind of this rabbinic process, right? How you knew that you were done with your rabbi training is you were a rabbi. And how did you know if you were a rabbi? You had people that followed you, right? You were making other disciples. And so part of the process for us, and how do you know that you're a disciple of Jesus? Well, you're on your way to, or you are making, or helping make other disciples. Jesus is inviting us to be a part of this process. And so may we not be people that merely sit and consume from Jesus, but actually invite others to come along and to be discipled by him as well. The other option, if you're interested, is that you can continue on your own. You can remain captured, you can remain wounded, and you can remain bound. Those are the two options. Be taken by Jesus, be healed by Jesus, and be sent by Jesus. Or remain captured by sin, wounded by sin, and bound by sin. Constantly living our lives out of a sense of self-protection and self-promotion, as opposed to proclamation of all that God has done and is continuing to do. Your choice. I would opt for the be taken, be healed, be sent. But we can have conversation about that. For those of us who would like to go down the taken, healed, sent route, I think we have a few things that we can do. We talk here about walking in grace. Andrew did a really great job this morning as he was leading us in that reflective song to reflect on where are you in your season? Where are you right now? I think often we look ahead and we do ourselves a disservice by going, oh, I need to be this contrived version of myself, as opposed to saying, okay, Lord, what does the next step in faithfulness to you look like? As we consider humility and grace, we go, what does it look like for us to walk in humility and to be generous? Let's talk about humility. Recognize the facts and acts of Jesus. Recognize the facts and the acts of Jesus. Who is Jesus? And what has he done? And how does it inform who I am and what I do? When we allow ourselves to be taken, healed, and sent by Jesus, we recognize the fact that he's redeemed us. I love, we've been, with some of the college students, we've been going through this chronological Bible read-through, and I just love the image in the Passover, or excuse me, not in the Passover, but the Day of Atonement, where they put the sin on the goat, and they release the goat out in the wilderness. Like, where'd your sin go? I don't know, but it ain't here no more. So when someone comes in, and as I talked about in the beginning, especially folks in recovery understand this, where you go, oh yeah, like you're this. You're just a drunkard. You're a meth addict. You're addicted to porn. You gamble. You this, whatever. Like, oh yeah, those are things I did once. That's not who I am. Now I'm a son. I'm a daughter. And all of those are just trophies of grace. Like, yeah, isn't it awesome that Jesus took this sex, meth, gamble, whatever addict and transformed them into something beautiful that proclaims the goodness and the glory of God? Let's get wrapped around the acts and the facts of Jesus, not about the lies and the past of us. And as we become humble, as we become secure in who we are as sons and daughters of God, this allows us to be generous. To go, yeah, I can give away. I'm not concerned about pecking order. I don't need to get up and get this thing because I've already been given everything that I need. He has taken away that need to secure my own position. He has healed me of that narcissism, and he's now sending me out with good news to proclaim to all the others who are lost. And so we give not out of a sense of guilt, but out of a sense of we're just like, I can't help it. Like, you ever been around those people that, like, they just can't help but pick up the tab? I used to coach baseball, and we had this dude he would just, like, real low-key, sly, like, leave 5 minutes before everyone else was going to leave. And I remember one night we're sitting there, we'd all gone out afterward for, we're hanging out, and all of a sudden we're like, where's Robert? And where's our tab? And finally we tracked the server, and we're like, hey, could we pay you? And she's like, oh, no, that other guy, like, picked up the tab. I'm like, there's like 10 of us. And he just like slide out, and we're like, Robert, like, will you let us? He's like, and he's like, no, I won't pick up the tab this time. And then he'd be like, oh, I have to use the bathroom. And you're like, it's been a minute. And you look out, like, don't see his truck anymore. Did it again. What if we can all walk with that sense of like, oh, I got tons. And what I love is so many of you do this in various ways. It isn't always fiscal. Some of you, it's with your time and your talent. It's with resources or connections where my friend Paul likes to say, all the resources of my friendship are available to you. Everything that I have is yours. And when you talk to Paul, there's no sense where he's just like, well, I could hook you up with this guy, but that might reflect poorly on me because I don't really know about you. He's just like, oh, you want to meet this person that I know that would be helpful to you? I'll arrange the meeting. Are we willing to walk in that type of freedom? Are we willing to take the humility to say, oh yeah, that's who I am now? Will we allow ourselves to be humble to say, I'm a son, I'm a daughter? Because I think it's this sense of arrogance and pride that we go back to. But I'm an addict, or I'm this, and this limits me, and whatever. And we go, those are not titles placed on us by God. And so what sort of lies are actually barriers to you walking in wholeness and freedom and helping others to do so as well? That's what I love some of the songs that we sang this morning, right? Like, we're not bound. by these old titles. There's none too poor, too naked, too stupid. Here's our heart. Take time to reflect on who God is. Let's get wrapped around the axle of our identity in Jesus. So a few things to consider. What do Jesus and others' disciples' examples of physical healing stir within you? Are they comforting? Are they concerning? Maybe there's somewhere in the middle, or maybe there's something else altogether. But what do they begin to do with our theological categories? And say, let's note the Pharisees' response. And do the Pharisees' response reveal ways in which you are acting proud or stingy in your relationship with others? And how does Jesus' grace correct this? So often we just try to muscle it ourselves and go, I'm going to be humble, I'm going to be humble, I'm going to be generous, I'm going to be generous. It's like, no, let's receive Jesus' grace. And in what ways is Jesus inviting you to express grace-informed humility and generosity today or this week? Might be just thinking about what's one way that you can, maybe you have an engagement with somebody this week where you've been a little prideful. What does it look like to come in with a posture of humility? Maybe you have an opportunity to be generous towards someone else. What does it look like to be generous? To go, yeah, giving away, this is going to hurt a little bit. This is going to make me a little uncomfortable. But Jesus is inviting me to do that. How does that begin to change our ability to operate from a position of obedience, not obedience to Jesus, not obedience to our comfort? And then, from what has Jesus taken you? I think it does us well to sit back and to consider the way that Jesus has changed our life. From what has he taken you? How has he healed you? And where is Jesus sending you? And in what way and in whose life is Jesus using you as part of his great exodus to take, heal, and send? Think about the real, and I know sometimes we think, I don't have time to do X, Y, Z thing. I remember talking with a friend of mine one time, and she's like, I just don't know anybody. Like she largely homeschooled, and husband ran a business. They did it together there at their home, and she's like, I have no idea like who I would even talk to. Like I just talked to my family and whatever. And then she was like, wait a minute, there are a few people in my life that I see on a daily basis that I can actually start to engage with in conversation. And so instead of thinking about like, what's this new thing that I have to start, let's think, sometimes it's helpful to think about like, where am I already? What relationships do I presently have? And where is Jesus inviting me to be part of where he is taking people, healing people, and sending people? Right, let's not reinvent the wheel. God's already here. He's in the midst of what we're doing. Let's participate with him. Okay? And then are you able to articulate this? It might be helpful to write it down, to talk about it with somebody else. I think it's really easy to just go, this kind of nebulous, gray, like, there's these people at this thing that I do sometimes. No, let's be specific. These people, this place, these times. This is where and then just ask the Lord, teach me, help me to understand, help me to see this. And then act. So when we hear God's voice, we remember, we remind, and we rejoice. Let's remember and remind one another and rejoice in the fact that we have been taken, healed, and sent, and we get to join with him in doing likewise. So we're going to take some time now to reflect. There's some Post-it notes in some food containers underneath the chairs at the ends of the aisle. We'll take some time to reflect on something from the morning. Feel free this is a time for us to remember. To articulate what the Lord is doing, to be present to what God is doing in our lives and communally, right? Not just individually. And so if you're new, what we do is we just take a moment to just write down a takeaway. It doesn't have to be from what I said. It could be from what Georgie read or Andrew sang, something Benjamin said, some conversation you had on your way here. What is the Lord doing in your life right now in response to what is going on this morning? And then if you're willing to write your name, great. If you're willing to put it over there on the redeemed wall, fantastic. It is a little bit humid, and so it may or may not stick to there very well. If it falls down, that's fine. We're not looking at making a really pretty thing for the grams later on today. But this is an exercise for us now. So I'll pray, and after a little while, Andrew and Chad will come back up to finish the service with some singing. So Jesus, thank you for going to the cross, for taking our sin, for taking us from our sin. By your resurrection, you show healing, and that you now heal us. Thank you for sending your Spirit to be here with us, and we pray, Lord, that you would convict and compel us on the fact that we too are sent. Help us to see where you have sent us, how you have equipped us, and the fact that you are right beside us as we go.